afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. Hope you had a great weekend. A little bit later in the show, Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast will join us. We'll talk some Cavs as well as Indians. We begin, though, by talking Browns with Doug Lesmerises, columnist for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. And Jadeveon Clowney, rehabbing an injury, getting after it. Take a look at what Jadeveon Clowney has been doing to get ready for the season. Let's welcome in Doug Lesmerises from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. And Doug, I have watched you do similar workouts, but he's rehabbing that meniscus, and it looks like he's getting ready to get after it a little bit.
I feel like you guys are trolling me. Every time I'm on, you're showing some ripped dude working out or flexing his muscle. What am I supposed to say to that, man? No, I did yoga for like a month one time, and I couldn't function after that. But I mean, it does look like, I think, one of the main questions about this Browns season is which Jadeveon Clowney are the Browns getting? And I have been a little skeptical about, are you getting A+ Clowney just based on age and injury history? And he's actually not as old as you maybe think he is. But every time you see this stuff like this, it's like, okay, well, I don't know. Like if they get A+ Clowney, if they get like #1 overall pick, his best season ever, Clowney, it's such an elevator, I think, for this franchise. That's not what I'm assuming. And I don't think it's what they're assuming. I don't think that's what, that's not what they need him to be. They don't need A+ Jadeveon Clowney for him to help them. But if that's what they get, then that's when you get into territory of like, well, then what does anybody else have that they don't have? Because they have 2 overall #1 picks in the draft at defensive end who look like that.
And yeah, you put those, you can put them together, you can put them on opposite ends. It opens up a number of options for the Browns. Well, Mina Kimes from ESPN had this to say about Jadeveon Clowney and how she thinks he fits in to the scheme of the NFL.
I feel like Jadeveon Clowney, we've almost reached a point where he's underrated. For a while, there was a lot of criticism of him around the league that he was overrated coming out of college because he wasn't able to turn that pass rush production into bringing down the quarterback, which is why he, of course, ranks 211th. But for all of that, he is still incredibly disruptive, especially on the inside, which is where I suspect you'll see him lined up a lot next to Myles Garrett. And he is an elite run defender, and that matters a great deal for this Browns team because while the defense made a ton of additions, particularly on the back end, which I believe Kimberly's going to talk about, they also had some really significant losses on the defensive line at tackle. Larry Ogunjobi is gone. Sheldon Richardson is gone. They're counting on young players and draft picks like Tommy Togiai to step up. And what would help those players a lot is if Jadeveon Clowney is able to bring that elite run-stopping prowess, that tackling, those tackles for losses that he did in previous stops to this defense. And I think he has that in him because he is still a very, very good player. He's just not one of the best pass rushers in the NFL.
And Doug, that's a point I think worth reiterating. He's really good against the run for whatever you want to say about his inability to get sacks at this point. We've seen the clips there, and he's a good run defender.
No, I know people like Scott Patsko for us have talked about that. You look at the numbers, and it's easy for knuckleheads like me to think that, defensive ends, edge guys, all that matters is sacks. All that matters is pass rush, and that's clearly not the case. I do think, and Mina's really smart. She's one of the smartest football analysts out there. That what it means for defensive tackle when you do have less sure things at defensive tackle. I mean, that Clowney has that ability. I think of all the edge guys that you could have brought in, he probably does that almost better than anybody who was out there. Better than some guys who got bigger money, who really are just pass rushers, and that's it. So that part of it, I think, is really interesting, and he doesn't have to be the leading sack guy. He can help Myles in that way, but that, when teams are, trying to put games away on the ground, or, things are getting down and dirty in the second half of a game, one tackle for loss on a 1st and 10 where you snuff out a run. I mean, those can be game-changing types of plays just as much as a sack can be. So it is a thing that sometimes with edge rushers, we think about it too little, but Mina's exactly right, that if that's what he's going to bring again, that's a little different than what they have elsewhere.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it counts against him because he was the #1 overall pick and so hyped, and everybody remembers the play against Michigan in the bowl game? Is that working against him in some ways?
I don't know. I think that he's moved around a little bit the last couple of years. Is more of it to me that you start that sort of bouncing around part of your career. Not that he's been a million places, but if he had come straight from the Texans to the Browns, and it's like, J.J. Watt, was a Texan his whole career, and then he hit free agency, and now he's on the Cardinals, and that's it. I think it is more about why are you available, right? Like, why are you moving around a little bit? And that, at least for me, is a little more the question. Now the thing is, I mean, great teams sort of hit on flyers, right? That's part of this. Part of being a great team is Myles Garrett. He's obvious, he's good. You trade for Odell Beckham, he's good. Nick Chubb, that's the 2nd round pick, he's good. But sometimes you take these things where you take a shot, 1 year for $8 million, you take a shot, and if he plays like a $16 million defensive end, I mean, that's how you win the Super Bowl. So, I mean, I think a good team, you have to have your core, and that's why the Browns are in such good shape. He's not in their core. He's not a must. He's a bonus, right? So that's what makes this move so great. And then that feeds on itself. I think it increases the chances of it working because it's not a desperation move. It's not a gotta have it move. It's let's take a shot on this guy. And if he really pops, now all of a sudden you might have the best roster in football.
So let's change our focus a little bit. Part of the 21 things to watch for the 2021 Browns that cleveland.com, the Plain Dealer, are doing. What does Myles Garrett need to do to become Defensive Player of the Year? Now, also, FanDuel has released their odds for said Player of the Year. Aaron Donald, the favorite, at +500. Myles Garrett is second at +600. So what do you need to do? What does he need to do to take that step?
I think it's probably fairly simple. One is the Browns are really good. Like, if the Browns go 9-8, he's not going to win. Even if he has 30 sacks, he's not going to win. But the Browns are like, if the Browns are like, 12-5, or, the 1 or 2 or 3 seed in the AFC, that's the first step. And then I think the second step is lead the league in sacks. And then I think he wins. And, it probably shouldn't be that easy, but I think it probably is that easy because he has not reached his peak yet. So he just needs to be sort of peak Myles Garrett for a whole year. And we were talking about our Orange and Brown Talk podcast recently, about whether he will lead the league in sacks. And it's like, well, when he's healthy and on the field, he really does average about a sack a game. And it's like, well, okay, you throw in maybe Clowney or some of this other stuff. You help Myles get a couple easy sacks that he maybe hasn't gotten as much in the past. So if he gets 17 and 17 games on his own, you throw in a couple easy ones, it's like, okay, now we're talking about like 20, 21 sacks. Add that to a 12-5 Browns team, and I think he wins.
All right, Doug Lesmerises, columnist for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. I'm not going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, more Odell Beckham video rehabbing. We'll also answer the question, could Baker Mayfield be a top 5 quarterback this year? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with Doug Lesmerises, columnist for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Odell Beckham Jr. just 7 months removed from ACL surgery. Certainly appears to be back at full strength. Take a look. More Instagram footage of the rehab process. Blow up my knee if I tried that. Again, Odell Beckham Jr. just 7 months removed from that ACL surgery. And Doug, I don't know that I could do that completely healthy. It makes my knees hurt just watching that.
You ever do the thing when you're walking down steps and you try to think to yourself, like, how fast can I walk down these steps? How coordinated am I? How fast could I go without having to grab the rail? And I get like 2 steps and I'm like, nope, I'm going to fall down the steps. So the thing I like best about that clip was that he had a shirt on, because I didn't need to see like another ripped guy making me feel bad about myself. But I mean, again, I think Odell, in a very different way, but in the end, it's somewhat similar to Clowney, is like you don't need A+ Odell for the Browns to be very, very, very good. If you get A+ Odell, like if Odell Beckham has the best season of his NFL career this year, what are we talking about, right? Again, that's the thing, that you have 2 guys in Beckham and Clowney who have shown what they can be, but maybe have not been the best of themselves in several years. But I don't think it's impossible for them to still be the best of themselves. We see this happen with athletes sometimes. You kind of have like whether it's an injury issue or you're just not a fit on the right team, you have a little bit of a lull, maybe 3 years in your career, and then you pop back again. You know, he's obviously working hard at it. If he comes back and is as explosive and fast and dynamic as we know he can be, you know, it just raises the level of this team even beyond, I think, what we believe it is right now.
Yeah, and you know, the thing you get, the sense you get with Beckham is that he is motivated to come back and show that he is, you know, one of the best. Let's change focus just a little bit. And I know you guys have written about this and talked about this. Will Baker Mayfield be a top 5 quarterback this season? Thoughts?
I made a list during the commercial break. I made a list. Here's here's what I think. Here's my official things I think about quarterbacks. So all things being equal, everybody healthy, everything normal, I think there is a clear top 5 of quarterbacks still in the NFL. And again, some of these are older guys and maybe they'll fall off a cliff at some point. But for the moment, I still would say Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, and Russell Wilson are your top 5. And I just don't, Baker is not going to break into that unless those guys come back to him, right? That's not where he's going to be. Now, Deshaun Watson's situation, we have no idea what's going to happen. He has these off-field issues. We don't know how he's going to play this year, whatever. Aaron Rodgers hates where he is. We don't know if he's going to get traded. We don't know how that's going to affect him when he's on the field. And he's starting to get a little bit older. And Tom Brady is the greatest old athlete in football history. No offense to George Blanda. So those are 3 guys. They would have to come back to Baker, though, right? I don't think Baker can rise up to them. Mahomes and Russell Wilson, I just think are a step above Baker. So that's 5. And then when you get into everybody else, because then you're getting into Josh Allen, Ryan Tannehill, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. I will say Dak Prescott, if he's completely healthy, I still think is probably better than Baker too. But you're getting into that range. I think Baker this season could be better than Lamar Jackson. I think he could be better than Josh Allen. I think he could be better than Justin Herbert, who's on the rise. So if any of those top 5 come back, and Watson really is the biggest wild card, then I think it's possible he could get in there, because I think there's that top tier, and I definitely think Baker is in that next tier. And I know Josh Allen was awesome last year, but I feel like Baker could make the kind of full season leap this season that Josh Allen made last season. And I'm not sure Josh Allen's leap last season is going to stick, not to the degree that it was all last year. So it's a long-winded answer. I'm always long-winded. I think he maybe could be 5 in a best case scenario if some of those guys in my top 5 have some stuff happen.
Yeah, and I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I don't think that's being overly optimistic. All right, let's take a listen to what Dominique Foxworth had to say about the extension for Baker Mayfield. This is a guy on ESPN, former defensive back. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I think that once you find a quarterback, the sooner you can do that deal, the better off you can be, because he only gets more expensive. And I think that Baker's obviously not going to be an MVP, but where are you going to find one of those? Like, waiting for something better isn't going to come. So you need to go ahead and accept that this is your quarterback and sign him as soon as possible, because your leverage only gets weaker and weaker, because right now he's potentially 3 years away from free agency. Then he's pretty far away, so he might want to take that big check. Next year will be 2 years away from it, and then the year after that, you can only franchise him one more time, and then you end up in that Dak Prescott situation. And so the price tag only goes up for quarterbacks. It never really goes down. So the sooner you can lock him up, once you know that that's your guy, the better off you are. You can amortize the bonus over several years, and it gives you more cap flexibility.
And Doug, that does make sense.
No, this is good. We're getting smart people, smart clips on the show today. To have Mina Kimes and Dominique Foxworth, I think, are 2 really clever, educated analysts about the NFL. I think Dominique Foxworth is right. But yet again, even he's saying within it, well, there is this 3-year window. It's about the timing within the window. But I do think the Dak Prescott analogy is always interesting. I think it'll be for any quarterback going forward, that it's like, okay, well, Dak and the Cowboys sort of pushed it as far as they could in how long they waited. He had a devastating injury, and then he still got paid. So, like, in the end, it's like the good quarterbacks are going to get paid no matter what. So then it really is, I think it's more about timing and how it affects your cap and who else you want to get signed and that kind of thing, which, again, I am just fascinated that people care about how they parcel out their cap space. But the leverage, here's the thing, as the Browns and Browns fans, the only way the Browns get more leverage is if Baker stinks. Well, who's rooting for that? And I don't want to live in a world, I don't think the Browns should live in a world where you let Carson Wentz and Jared Goff dictate that we're going to wait on Baker. That's the only thing about this. And I always give caveats. I cap money, I don't know. But don't be scared to sign your guy because Carson Wentz started to stink. That is not it. That is absolutely, I want zero part of that thinking. And I don't think the Browns are going to let that affect their thinking. The fact that Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, after they got their deals, sort of proved that they weren't worth it, that is not a reason to delay on Baker. Anything else that is your decision about your situation, okay, they know better than we do. But please don't be scared because Carson Wentz stinks. That's advice I tell my kids. Don't let Carson Wentz stinking affect any aspect of your life. Let's not let Carson do that to us.
Doug Lesmerises, columnist for The Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we will take a look at how the NFL coaches are ranked and where Kevin Stefanski is on this list. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions. Should I get it? Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with cleveland.com's columnist Doug Lesmerises, also writes for The Plain Dealer. CBS Sports came out and ranked the NFL coaches. Andy Reid was number 1, Bill Belichick number 2, John Harbaugh 3, Sean Payton 4. Kevin Stefanski checked in at 13. Let's take a look at some of the rationale. And this is where it says the Browns just might be bordering on too much hype after their long-awaited playoff trip a year ago. But he goes on to say that Stefanski got the most out of Baker Mayfield. Offensive attack built an even better lineup in 2021. Cleveland feels like it's in very calm, measured, and creative hands. Bring back in Doug Lesmerises. And Doug, I would say what makes that even more impressive is Kevin Stefanski, first-year head coach, without any training camp, without any preseason games, after a horrible opener, somehow got everything settled down and turned in the right direction to have the season that the Browns did.
No, we talked a lot. I think we were talking a lot a year ago at this time about continuity, and without a normal preseason, that teams that had continuity, same coaches, same quarterback, same GM, they were going to have an edge over teams like the Browns, who had a new GM and a new head coach. And the Browns played like they had continuity. I think that's probably, even though they got better over the course of the year, like they had a crazy opener, which is just like, what are you going to do? But they very quickly started playing more like a team that, there wasn't a lot of, hey, what are we supposed to do here kind of stuff. So I do think Kevin Stefanski deserves a lot of credit for that. We did it on our Orange and Brown Talk podcast earlier this offseason. We had a draft of the best coaches in the NFL. I think we did draft Kevin Stefanski in the top 10. It's hard when you have, kind of new guys versus longtime guys. And even, in this division, it's like, well, John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, those are two guys. If you're going to have a list, they've got to be ahead of Kevin Stefanski because they've been doing it for a long time. But I kind of think that Kevin Stefanski is going to be the Browns head coach for the next 20 years, and that this is the beginning of a thing. And, that at some point in time, people are going to look at Kevin Stefanski like they look at Mike Tomlin, and that he's going to be ingrained with the franchise. And I think it's sort of that calm, measured composure that just keeps kind of things going. And then the fact is, just in this era, when you are an offensive mind, you don't have to be searching for an offensive coordinator. You're not a defensive guy who that if your coordinator leaves, your offensive coordinator leaves, what are we going to do? He's always going to be the offensive brain trust of this team. Alex Van Pelt's really important, but it's always going to be Stefanski's offense, and that's just an edge. That's just an edge in the modern NFL. So, he's going to keep moving up, I think. Now, let me throw in a caveat. He sort of entered a perfect situation, other than the pandemic, in that he had a really talented team that had a stinky year the year before. So guys were looking for structure. Guys were, he didn't have a deficit of talent. That's a good team. They just had a bad season. Now you've got to build on the success. And, last time they sort of had success and then they had all the hype coming into the Freddie Kitchens year. They didn't handle that. So I do think that's a different challenge. They didn't have a ton of expectations last year. Now they do. So that is a different challenge for him. And we have to hold off a little bit until we see how he handles that. Again, I cover most of the Browns in Ohio State. I think Stefanski and Ryan Day are in very similar situations. Everything's gone perfectly. Day's done it for 2 seasons, Stefanski for 1. It almost makes me curious how people will react the first time something goes wrong, because something's going to go wrong. Right? I mean, something's going to happen. The Browns are going to lose a game they shouldn't lose. They're going to have a little losing streak. There's going to be a conflict with the player. But for Browns fans right now, it's almost hard to imagine that with Kevin Stefanski. It's like, well, he does everything right. It's like, well, nobody does everything right for 10 years. But so far, hard to argue.
Yeah, and he made all the right moves. And it was interesting, particularly after that Week 1 game. Your first game as head coach, and it did not go well. All right, so ESPN has the biggest questions for each of the teams in the NFL. Biggest question for the Browns: how long will it take for the revamped defense to find its stride?
I have covered a lot of college football, right, where you're forced to change every year. But in the NFL, it's not that unusual to change, right? That I don't think I think they might get blown out at Kansas City. I think I can't remember, Dave. I got to tell you, I talk so much now. I don't know who I said stuff to. I don't know if it was on a podcast. I don't know if it was to you. I don't know if it was to my wife. I think the Browns very likely might get blown out at Kansas City. Going to Kansas City is the toughest game in the NFL. I think they're the best team, and they're at home, and they have a good home field advantage. And they're going to be ticked because of the way the Super Bowl went down. So I think they won't hit it in Week 1 at Kansas City, but I think it might be Week 2. And they'll come back and be like, okay, well, we got Mahomes, man. That was crazy. Hey, why didn't you cover Tyreek Hill a little bit better? And then they'll figure it out, and they'll be fine. So I do not think it will be as long as it sort of took the offense a year ago, where the first half was sort of Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield figuring each other out. I don't think it's going to be the same thing where it takes half a season for this defense and Joe Woods to sort of figure each other out. So Week 2, and they'll find their stride.
I would agree. I don't think it's going to be that long. The training camp will help. Preseason games, even though there's only 3 of them, will help as well. All right, time for us to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Get ready, Doug. This is what one of our viewers wants to know.
Hey, gentlemen. This is Nick from Akron. What are the rules as far as how many guys we can stash away and protect? I don't know, and a lot of us probably don't know. Because of COVID, the rules have changed. So I was wondering if you could explain that. With all those games, how many guys are we going to be able to stash away and protect? Gentlemen, have a blessed day.
All right, and Doug, my understanding is the rules for that are still to be determined as far as COVID and all that goes. It's something the Players Association and the NFL will have to agree on as they get further into training camp and lay out those ground rules.
Hey, Mary Kay, they're asking me a rules question on TV, and I don't know anything about rules. Yeah, okay. Call me back. Can we talk about ranking Baker Mayfield again? that the person asking the question within the question knew more about the situation than I do now. I'm like, there's COVID rules for stashing players?
Yeah.
I apologize. I'm being a terrible guest today, dude. I did not look. I was at the State House. Mike DeWine signed a name, image, and likeness bill so that college athletes in Ohio starting on July 1st can start endorsing stuff and making some money. I got home 5 minutes before the show started. I did not look for 1 second what the topics were for today's show. This is Sports4CLE Raw. And that was my first fumble, I think. I apologize.
Okay, it's unedited, but the answer is it's still to be determined by the players. I got you, Doug. The Players Association and the owners have to come to an agreement, and they're going to do it as it evolves through training camp. All right, we're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, riskiest move for each NFL team in the offseason, plus one player each team should consider trading before the season. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. A My Social Security account allows you to access your earnings history and benefits information, request a replacement Social Security card, get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football with Doug Lesmerises, columnist for The Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Doug, the Bleacher Report. Riskiest move for each NFL team. For the Browns, they say it was releasing Sheldon Richardson.
Yeah, I was trying to think over the break because, again, there's not a lot of risk here, right? They're doing, like Clowney's not really a risk because, like, if it doesn't work, they're okay. And some of the other stuff, like John Johnson, is not a risk. That's like a sure thing. And like a lot of the stuff that you know, they didn't lose anybody like on the offensive side, right? They're bringing all the receivers back. The offensive line, they kept those 5 guys who were all awesome, kept them intact. So I do think it has to be Sheldon Richardson. And again, you know, we all know Mary Kay Cabot had been reporting sort of from the moment it happened that there was a possibility of him coming back. And so that sort of maybe being there always affected my version of this of like, okay, it's not they don't like him. It's just that maybe they think they can save a little money on him. That also, though, is part of the deal that's going to happen here. That those are the kind of players you have to be willing to lose and you have to trust yourself to replace because it's not a core guy. So I would agree with that, but my guess is when Bleacher Report was doing that list, there were some moves that other teams made that were much riskier on the risk meter, and that they had to scrape around a little bit for what the Browns did, because the Browns offseason really has been, pretty solid. I think maybe even you'd argue, sort of leaving that second outside corner spot to either an injured Greedy Williams or a rookie in Greg Newsome might be a little bit of a risk, letting Terrence Mitchell go, who was kind of like a backstop, who sort of saved him last year at that spot. But even that is like, well, Greedy was a second-round pick and Newsome is a first-round pick that everybody likes. That's not a huge risk. But I think in some ways that might even be a little bit riskier than Sheldon, because it's such a premium spot. And I think they have enough bodies at defensive tackle that they will be able to patch that together.
Yeah, and Richardson being released strictly about having enough money to do the extensions that saved him money on the cap. All right, one player from each NFL team that team should consider trading, also by Bleacher Report, linebacker Mack Wilson.
So it's like, hey, we got our 6th linebacker. What will you give us for him? That's not a shot at Mack. I think we've overestimated Mack. I mean, he's a 5th-round pick. I mean, I think, he came in like when they weren't very good. And then like they kept getting better, and it's like, okay, well then like the 5th-round pick, there's probably not room for him. And I think he had he had a decent camp the last couple weeks ago. So that I think matters, but that's one of those things where I don't even know what that would be. I feel like, Dave, a lot of my answers are like, well, the Browns roster is perfect. They don't need any more, and they don't need to take anything away. Because it's like, well, where's the shoe? Like Rashard Higgins, frankly, might be a little bit of a surplus now, right? That if DPJ is gonna be what he is, and everybody's excited about the guy they got in the draft, Anthony Schwartz, and then you add Odell's healthy and Jarvis Landry, it's like, all right, well, what's Rashard Higgins really gonna be for you? Maybe like he might be your 5th receiver. Kadarius Hodge is still in there, right? That like, I don't know what the role is for Rashard Higgins at a time when some people make it seem like, man, they can't lose Rashard Higgins. So, but also I'm not in a hurry to deal depth out of the receiver room. So I'll just lean back on perfect roster. Nobody.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Here's one, too. 7 players who could be traded before the start of the season. This, again, by the Bleacher Report. 2 of them have the Browns as one of 2 landing spots. So the first one, Stephon Gilmore. We've talked about him. Cornerback. Says the Browns and the Seahawks are listed as the landing spots for him. Would cost some money because it's $7 million this year. Would want an extension. Would you be willing to do that? And you mentioned that he would certainly be very good. He's one of the best cover corners in the league, and a little older, but still very good.
I mean, like, do they want to lock up the Super Bowl now? I mean, that's like, it's hard. Like, the fan side of it is like, yeah, let's, whatever it takes. Like, you got a little space, right? You can squeeze them in. Let's do it. It would be such a go for it move. It would be such a go for it move. And to line up Gilmore and Ward as your 2 outside corners with everything else you have going on with the defense, I do think they do have a lot of young veterans, and to add like a guy who's been around a little bit longer, like I don't think is a terrible idea. I was sort of in on them maybe adding somebody at the trade deadline last year, and they did it. And I do think this may be one of those things in the Andrew Berry era where we sort of like, oh man, maybe you could push the envelope a little bit here. And I just don't know how often they're going to push the envelope, right? That maybe I would say Clowney was in some ways pushing the envelope, but they did it at a very reasonable number on a 1-year deal. So the idea that like we're going to get Gilmore, you got to squeeze him in, then he wants an extension, that is a complicating situation long term. But man, for right now, I think they'd be if you add him, I think you would have a very strong case that they might be the best team in football. So I'm not going to say no, but I'm also, it's hard for me to wrap around my head around the idea of that actually happening. But it would be such a go for it move that it kind of gets my juices flowing.
All right, the other one, Jordan Hicks, a linebacker. Browns Bengals listed as the suitors. Hicks is an Ohio guy from Lakota West. I just can't see them trading for a linebacker. Can you?
You know, it feels like they have some linebackers that they want to play, right? I mean, I think they want to play Jacob Phillips. I think they want to play JOK. I think they believe in Anthony Walker. They want to have him out there. I think they still think Sione Takitaki can at least help them situationally. You know, Jordan Hicks, man, this is like you start getting old. I remember the Jordan Hicks recruitment when he went to Texas and his family was friends with the strength coach at Texas. And, you know, for Ohio State to lose that big of a recruit out of Ohio was like a major deal. And that guy's a good player, but I just like sort of to your point, I think I think they really want to, like, they've got to figure out what Jacob Phillips can do. And I don't think it's like a risk to the defense to put Jacob Phillips on the field this year. And so with all the expectations around JOK and the other things they have, you know, again, it also amazes me, Dave, sometimes as a guy who doesn't really understand how football works. You know, sometimes it's like this Jordan Hicks stuff. It's like, oh, they got Jordan Hicks for like a 7th round pick. Sometimes they have these trades where it's like, that guy seemed like a pretty decent player, and you got him for almost free, right? I mean, they got Ronnie Harrison for a 5th round pick last year. It's like, all right, well, I don't know. If you get Jordan Hicks for a pick that basically is worthless, then I guess I'd be in favor of that, of throwing him into the mix. But I'm okay with, I think they have enough options at linebacker. It's the same conversation. I'm okay with linebacker being one of the weaker positions on the team. Jordan Hicks doesn't feel like a need to me.
Yeah, and you've already said it's a perfect roster, so if you add to it, is it like a most perfect roster?
I mean, it's, you know, we're getting to the point. I'm just going to make a sign that says perfect roster. And every time it's like, well, what if they did this? And it's like, well, what if they did this? And it's like, perfect roster.
Doug Lesmerises, columnist for The Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. As always, Doug, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Next time I will prep for more than 10 seconds.
All right. Doug Lesmerises, you can read him in the pages of The Plain Dealer as well as on cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll continue talking Browns with Kevan Arnold. Do the Browns have the most complete roster in the NFL? We knew what Doug's answer was going to be. We're going to ask Kevan. Sports for CLE. He'll be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
As the COVID-19 vaccines become available, you might be asking yourself, should I get it? And if I do, will I be able to go about life without putting my family at risk? You've got questions, and that's normal. The fact is, the vaccines are safe and effective. They're going to save lives. To get the latest on the COVID-19 vaccines, visit getvaccineanswers.org, because getting back to the moments we miss starts with getting informed. It's up to you.
Sports for CLE continues. We've talked a lot about the Browns roster and just how good it can be. NFL Network's Mark Ross ranked them. Browns were top of the league.
I think they're the most talented roster in the NFL, but more than that, they have the confidence in destroying the Steelers in the playoffs and then going toe-to-toe with KC. We know Mahomes was out of there, but just that confidence that a young team has and the continuity with the head coach, Kevin Stefanski, and the general manager, Andrew Berry. The whole organization seems to be on a different page now, and that confidence a young team needs to progress. And I was with Philly back in the day. I mentioned Donovan before, where we just built and built and built because we kept gaining confidence. I see the same thing with this Cleveland team, where they know they can do it now as opposed to hoping they can do it. So in my mind, they're definitely the favorites, James.
Let's welcome in Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. Kevin, when you hear that, what do you make of the way the Browns roster has been built out this offseason?
Well, I know you guys we're just talking to Doug Lesmerises about perfect roster, and he wants to hold up the sign of perfect roster every time he hears this question. It's as complete as you're going to get. If there's any question marks, it's the defensive tackle room for me. It's just with the inexperience. You guys were talking about, of course, Sheldon Richardson being let go due to the money this offseason, and it's a guy that you know what you're going to get out of him on the field. He's played in at least 15 games, 7 out of his 8 seasons, played in 16 games, both of his seasons here in Cleveland. So we have a lot of guys coming back. You have Andrew Billings, who opted out last year as part of the COVID opt-outs across the NFL. And you have some young guys coming in. Tommy Togiai taken in the 5th round. I know Marvin Wilson is one guy that they picked up in rookie free agency. And even Malik McDowell, someone that hasn't had a chance to play, had some issues off the field, and of course an injury back in 2017. But guys you haven't seen on the field, but a lot of upside. So on paper, it looks like a perfect roster. It may take a week or two for this defense to really show what kind of dominance they're going to be actually on the field and not just on paper.
So if you had an area of concern with the roster, it'd be the defensive tackles. Is that what about the cornerback? That the one thing that scares me is Greedy Williams. You just never know about shoulders. Denzel Ward kind of banged up, and then you know you're looking at a rookie. Now, granted, I like Greg Newsome, loved him, and really liked the pick. But does that concern you because it's such a pass-heavy league? You need enough guys that can chase those receivers all over the field.
You do, and you know I know Stephon Gilmore is still out there and has been linked to the Browns so many different times. They talk about him on the trade market in the NFL, and that's a guy that, again, you know what you're going to get out of him. He's going to be that savvy veteran out there that you can pair with Denzel Ward, but you have a deep roster, and I think guys that have proven more on the back end, and especially if you go with a 4-2-5 like they are talking they want to go with on this defense. Now you got less linebackers on there, and you added so much depth to not just the cornerback room, but to the safety room, and 2 guys from the LA Rams, part of a dominant defense out there in Troy Hill and John Johnson III, that may be able to kind of cover up for maybe some of those issues on the field. The biggest concern there in that cornerback room, like you just talked about, Dave, is going to be the injuries. Can this team stay healthy? And guys that have shown their, of course, best ability is your availability, haven't always been available. Will that be the issue for this defense and for the back end going against some of these top-end offenses? And you start right off the bat against one of the best, absolute best in the NFL in the Kansas City Chiefs.
So let's shift focus just a little bit. You know, we talked about Sheldon Richardson. They released him to get money under the cap so they can do these extensions. Who do you think it gets extended first for the Browns? Now you've got Mayfield. That's going to be a huge contract. Ward's probably going to be a pretty big contract. Then you got Wyatt Teller and you got Nick Chubb. Who do you think gets done first? And of those 4, is there one that you think might not get done and you know you may not be able to get done what you'd like to in saving all the guys?
Well, I mean, I'll start with, the biggest concern to me may be Denzel Ward, even though him and Chubb talked about wanting to stay here and Denzel Ward being from this area, of course. But getting top-end money as a cornerback, that might be one of those deals. If you get Baker done, you get Chubb done, and even to a certain extent Wyatt Teller, because this team put so much of an emphasis on building that offensive line for their franchise in Baker Mayfield to protect him, keep him upright, and allow him to do what he does best back there behind center. then where is the money? It depends on what kind of contracts these guys get, depending on or based on who gets it first. I mean, it might be Nick Chubb, because this guy just doesn't say anything. He just goes out there and does his work. And when he says he wants to be here, I believe him. And if there's any deal that gets done first, it might be Nick Chubb. And Baker Mayfield, of course, is going to be the number one. And I think that they will, and they should, of course, extend him this offseason. You take the risk of, does he play better in year 4 and wants even more money than him and his agents are asking for this offseason? But he might be, and his agents might be waiting for Lamar Jackson or, of course, Josh Allen in Buffalo to set the market and see what these guys are going to get, instead of them being the ones to set the market. So the easiest one might be Nick Chubb or Wyatt Teller, guys that know what they're going to go out there and do, and they just do their job. They don't need to put any words out there. They don't talk. All their talking is done between those 4 white lines on the football field.
Kevan Arnold and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we're going to shift our focus. Indians and Cavs coming up. Indians made a roster move. We'll tell you who is coming. Josh Naylor obviously on the injured list. We'll also take a look at what the Cavs might do with that 3rd pick. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
First, they said cigarettes were safe. We know how that turned out. Now, they say they didn't market e-cigarettes to teens. Fact, more than 1 in 4 high school students are vaping, and 80% say their first e-cigarette was flavored. Vaping is harmful to developing brains. The reason we think vaping is safe? Marketing. Same lies, different day. Tell Big Vape to quit lying.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. Indians getting ready to open up a 3-game series against the Tigers, part of a 7-game homestand. A move made before the game, necessitated by the injury to Josh Naylor. Naylor on the injured list with that fractured ankle. Kyle Nelson also sent to AAA. The Indians recall Oscar Mercado for his first action with the Tribe this year, and Logan Allen. Allen was shut down in AAA for nearly a month, 3 weeks, with some inflammation in his left throwing elbow. So Logan Allen back up. Mercado has hit the ball better in June. He's hitting .265 in June, still only .218 on the year. Not in the lineup tonight. Some other good signs, though. Franmil Reyes is starting to hit the baseball in his rehab assignment. Not ready to get called up yet. But Reyes had a home run yesterday for AAA Columbus, 4 of 12 in 4 games. There you see the line drive he hit out of the park. Still needs a couple more rehab assignment games, possibly activated Saturday or Sunday for the Indians. Let's bring back in Kevan Arnold from the Voice of the Land podcast. And Kevin, when you look at this, Reyes could be a big lift to this lineup, and Indians certainly need something.
They need something right now. I mean, first of all, and first and foremost, of course, thoughts and prayers and best wishes out to Josh Naylor. Looking at that injury yesterday and watching the game, you have to feel for him. Everything he's been able to bring to this team, not just on the field, but the energy and the spirit that he brings to the ballpark every single day. So best wishes to him in his recovery. But offensively all year long, they've kind of needed a spark. And before Reyes got hurt, he was that spark for them and kind of backing up Jose Ramirez. Ramirez is always going to hit. Every hitter goes through those struggles throughout the season, but Ramirez is going to be that consistent guy for you. It was who else was going to come along with him. And it looked like Franmil Reyes was going to be that guy in that DH spot to go along with Jose Ramirez to kind of start to lengthen out that lineup. And unfortunately, the injury bug has just hit this team time and time again, and don't even have any of your 5 starters from opening day in your pitching rotation right now. And this lineup it's more so Columbus Clippers and AAA guys kind of coming up, getting their first taste or some of their first taste of major league action to try to help this team, because somehow, some way through all of this, they are still above 500. And if you can get Franmil Reyes back, even Roberto Perez and Zach Plesac, that's going to go a long way to a team that is only 2.5 back of the Chicago White Sox in their division.
Yeah, and you kind of scratch your head. It's the rotation, it's the position players. I mean, again, 7-game homestand, and things get really, really tough after the Tigers leave town. You have the Astros, you have the Rays. There's a lot of good teams that the Indians have to deal with in July. Let's shift our attention for a moment to the Cavs. So the Cavs, would you trade Colin Sexton? They get the 3rd pick in the draft. We'll get into that in a minute. Would you trade Colin Sexton? Because I just don't think it's working with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. I don't think it's either guy's fault. I don't think either pick was a blown pick. I just don't think they work together the way you need a backcourt to work in the NBA.
Yeah, and everybody talks about this core 4 that the Cavaliers have, and Garland, Sexton, Jared Allen at the center, and of course Isaac Okoro, who they picked last year, is kind of your defensive stalwart out there on the floor and hoping he kind of progresses offensively. But Colin Sexton, he's a guy that can go score, but when him and Garland on the floor, it just doesn't seem to mesh, like you just said, Dave. And while I love Colin Sexton, I'm a fan of Colin Sexton, I won't like it if they do trade him. I got to look at it realistically. Sometimes you got to take those fan glasses off and you got to look at things realistically. And some of the options that are going to be available in this draft, this team really needs some wing players and some athleticism out there on the wing, but guys that can kind of work well together. And I think Darius Garland needs someone alongside him at the 2 to work alongside him when it's just it's either Garland or it's Sexton. It's never both of them finding a way to coexist on the floor. So it may just be an unfortunate, necessary move that the Cavs have to make to move on from Colin Sexton instead of giving him some sort of extension or trying to make him some sort of 6th man for their team and go after one of these top guys in this draft, because getting top 3 in this one was really, really important.
So you mentioned that. Who do you think the 3rd pick would be? If you had your option, Cade Cunningham probably isn't going to be there, and Evan Mobley may not. Most people think those are going 1-2. Who, assuming that, who do you think the 3rd pick fits best with the Cavs?
Yeah, I really love Jalen Suggs, but he's kind of that point guard, and I don't know, that might be another Sexton Garland pairing that just may not work. But I do love the game that Jalen Suggs has. But looking at Jalen Green, that has got to be the guy. And I'm hoping that a lot of these early mock drafts and prognosticators are correct with Evan Mobley going to Houston. A lot of people are thinking that Jalen Green, if Cade Cunningham wasn't in this draft, he would be number 1 on most people's boards, and Detroit would pick him up so no one else could. And that is a guy on the wing that playing in the G League. He's one of those guys that went from high school to the G League instead of playing in college. So he's playing against professionals every single day and taking care of business, scoring almost 18 points a game for the Ignite in the G League. And a guy, again, on the wing that can go score for you, can get his own, and then can kind of work off of Darius Garland a little bit. And maybe those guys can kind of work together where Garland can come off the ball a little bit. And it just looks like a better 1-2 pairing. In a positionless NBA, you still need guys that do certain things well, and you still kind of need guys to define their roles as 1, 2, and all the way up through the 5, and then kind of interchange as you go from there.
Kevan Arnold from the voice of the Land podcast. As always, Kevin, appreciate the time and the insight. Good stuff. Again, Kevan Arnold, you can hear him on the Voice of the Land podcast. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, that'll do it for this edition of Sports 4 CLE. Scheduled guests tomorrow, Dan Lobby, Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com and the Plain Dealer, and John Fanta will be along. Talk some Browns, talk some Cavs, talk some Indians. Sports 4 CLE. We will see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody.